There was a 5-year wait, with some spin-offs in between, but finally, in 2019, there was a legit sequel to The Lego Movie. This time, Phil Lord and Chris Miller wrote the screenplay, while Mike Mitchell took over directing duties. Like the first, it was largely creative, with the set pieces and the animation, and the voice cast was still impressive. But it wasn't as celebrated as the first film. What went wrong? Did anything go wrong? I remember seeing this in the theater, but I haven't returned to it since. I watched it again just for this review. Does it leave an impression? This sequel, or second part as the title calls it, brings back Emmett, Wildstyle, and the entire gang for another world-ending plot involving a new location and new characters. This time around, they're split up, akin to other movie sequels like Empire Strikes Back, The Two Towers, or Toy Story 2, and Wildstyle and company deal with Queen Whatever Wannabe, while Emmett meets a new character, Rex, a dangerous and uber-masculine hero who has no understanding of teamwork and has a hidden secret. Right away, it seems to be doing everything necessary for a sequel. It's a common but effective trope to split the characters into two separate storylines, and there's another cheesy end-of-the-world plot in tone with what happened in the 2014 film. And rather than keep the human element a surprise third-act twist, we instead understand why the children and parents impact the events we see from the start. It begins right away where the last movie ended. They kill Vitruvius off again, I guess because they couldn't get Morgan Freeman back, and we see the Duplo blocks destroy the city, an obvious parallel to the little sister ruining the brothers' playtime. Then, 5 years go by, the exact amount of time between movie releases, and the world has become a Mad Max Fury Road hellscape, which seemingly grows from the brothers' experience with older imagination. In fact, he probably just watched Mad Max Fury Road. Anyways, there's still a conflict with an unknown enemy, with many of their attributes being happy, colorful, and eccentric. These enemies kidnap most of the characters seen in the first film, except Emmett, who journeys with the new guy, Rex, to stop Momageddon, and a marriage between Batman and the Queen, which represents the unity between the two groups. I like how the first movie was secretly a story about the conflict between a parent and child, while this one is somewhat secretly about the conflict between siblings. For the Lego plot, the first one was about finding your creative self in a world of generic personalities, where this one is about being true to yourself, I suppose. That was kind of the point of the first movie, but here, the threat is becoming a more toxic version of yourself, which is exactly what Emmett learns after running into a possible future version of himself. Everyone else doesn't seem to learn anything. Actually, a lot of them don't even get much screen time. We see Batman in a more basic form, probably because he just got his own movie, and we get a lot of Wildstyle, who doesn't trust anyone in the new world. However, the rest of the characters get a few lines, but are not nearly as important this time around. It could maybe be excused, like there just wasn't enough of a runtime, but it's not like they introduced too many new characters, and Benny, the pirate, and Unikitty were also memorable the first time around. It doesn't even feel like they're here, which can often be a flaw with this split storyline, but the movies I mentioned earlier tend to pay more attention to their ensemble compared to what's done here. This is more like Alice Through the Looking Glass. I think that's where I start to have problems, because what's substituted for the great group from the last movie are things I don't find to be suitable replacements. There's Queen Whatever Wannabe, which is a shapeshifter and could lead to a lot of creativity, but for the most part, they tend to do human formations, or she remains a flat blob. She turns into an octopus and a horse at one point, but mostly she was a letdown. There's an ice cream cone guy and General Sweet Mayhem, but both don't have much going for them. Ice cream guy is basically a less impressionable Alfred, and Sweet Mayhem is just Wildstyle again. This is a musical. The first one wasn't, but this has full-on musical numbers, and honestly, I wasn't too into it. Sure, there's a couple catchy beats, but the lyrics are not retentive. The reason Everything Is Awesome worked was because it was very memorable, but also funny. It was kind of mocking generic animation movies aimed at children, while being an extremely good song. Here, the musical bits are exactly like the generic animation movies aimed at children that the first movie was mocking. Colorful characters are thrown at your face, and the only song to write home about is Catchy Song, which has the same qualities as Everything is Awesome, so it's kind of repeating what worked in the first film. And while it's an okay song, it doesn't come across as natural. I think that's what surprises me. This does so much of what the first movie did and tries to replicate it, but that's the biggest no-no of sequels, because more than likely, the formula won't work a second time. It very rarely does. It only worked for Lord and Miller in 22 Jump Street because the entire joke revolved around the idea of a sequel. After seeing that, I assumed they would never try to do an actual sequel. I know they didn't direct this, but they wrote it. It seems like I'm criticizing it a ton, but there are things I like about it. It's not even bad, but it's a bit tired. It's possible that the other spin-offs maybe ruined the impact, but then again, the Lego Batman movie was really good, and it did its own thing. I'm not sure how much more you could have done to top the previous one unless you kept doing smaller spin-offs, because the last one had a world-ending plot. It was about creativity in general, the very thing Lego is all about, and it included human characters. You kinda dropped every good idea into one amazing production. I should start to go through the good stuff though. I love Rex being a future version of Emmett, a reflection of what he could become with a negative mindset, refusing help and seeing the worst in people. There's some great nods to time travel movies, and the whole character is built as a parody of other Chris Pratt films, like Jurassic World and Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm not sure they stick the landing though. He disappears Back to the Future style, as Emmett chooses not to become him. But that's it. There's not legit growth for the character. The whole point is that he won't change, and everyone likes him for the way he is, even though in the real world, people do change. People can become toxic, or more insightful, and so many other possibilities. Here, the only thing Emmett learns is to not become Rex, while Wildstyle accepts him for who he is. Like she did in the first movie. From the beginning, all the characters are annoyed at Emmett, looking down on him. But didn't we already go over this the first time around? He proved himself. In this, the people are negative towards him when they get captured, and Emmett must learn to not take it to heart, otherwise he'll become awful. The other characters do a retread of the first film. We don't even know if everyone besides Wildstyle accepts Emmett for who he is. This is supposed to be about Emmett himself, and I think it works in a way. I think it's important that just because people treat you in a certain way doesn't give you a pass to act toxic. But like I said, it's kind of ignoring the idea of any change being part of a person's progression. But plainly staying true to yourself is enough. It's a bit muddled. You can certainly dive into that aspect more, but I just feel that it's rushed and lacks the complexity of the original. There's still funny jokes and visual gags, including a cameo from Bruce Willis of all people, but it's not as much of what's found in the 2014 production. The part that really works here is the human element, especially the connection between the siblings. I think this is relatable to a lot of viewers, and it's a good next step from what was done previously. Man, have I been criticizing this whole thing? I don't hate it. It's a solid 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's enjoyable to watch, but in the same way things like Trolls or Cars are enjoyable to watch. I had a huge appreciation for the Lego Movie, and I consider it one of my all-time favorites, going above and beyond in all aspects. So I'm probably just shocked that this one would be more closely aligned to a typical kids movie when the first one was the antithesis of that formula. You could maybe argue that the sister, who's younger and maybe enjoys things aimed at younger audiences, is the wraparound reason why this has more generic kids fluff, but if that were the case, I'd expect some more humor to go with it. The animation is still stellar, the voice cast is having fun, and I have a good enough time with it. I don't think anybody expected this one to top the first movie, but I think I'm just disappointed that it didn't seem invested in itself at all. I think it was tough to do a sequel to the Lego Movie. You can't really make a movie that has every single good idea you ever had, have it all work out perfectly, and then do it again. It's just not going to work out. They pretty much played every single good note they could the first time around. However, I think it really proves the worth of Lord & Miller that the worst, or better yet, the least best thing they were ever attached to was the Lego Movie 2. Thanks to Ryan for this Patreon request. Thanks for watching the video, and special shout out to Anthony, Anna, Kirsten, Lucas, Ryan, and Robert for the support on Patreon. By joining my Patreon, you can get exclusive videos and blogs, and for only $7, you can request your own movie review. I hope you stick around, cinephile, and have a happy, productive day.